Thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you to the Press Club for hosting all of us. You came to learn about Bob Woodward. You've learned a little about Catherine, about George, and I want to say a word about Marinus, who's one of Bob's oldest friends and closest buddies. They were each other's editors over the years. They were 1-2 on an investigative staff that would not quit. And as you have just seen, David in his own way is as special as Bob is. And as David said, they are different. But if you have not read and enjoyed David's amazing book on the president, Barack Obama, the story, it is another in an amazing career of David Marinus books, but I could not recommend it to you more highly. I want to mold my remarks about Bob around what David has said. First of all, there are a room full of present and former Washington Post people here. I can't introduce them all. I want you to meet 4 because I know that this room is full of fans of great journalism. And I want to introduce Marcus Brauckley, the editor of the Washington Post, Len Downey, his predecessor and Bob's and my colleague, who goes so far back that he was Bob's editor on many of the Watergate stories, and Dana Priest and Ann Hull, who are collectively the 2 reporters who broke the Walter Reed story some years ago, but have each gone on and won other Pulitzer Prizes for other work since. And would the 4 of you stand? Yeah. So Woodward has been at the Post 41 years, and by God, I've been there before he was. I came to the Post in 1971 as a reporter, and it's a source of considerable irritation to me that even though I've run off all the other reporters who came in 1971, I'm still not the best reporter who came to the Post in 1971, and I never will be. But if you want to know why the Washington Post is such a lucky place, listen to the words that Catherine and George and David spoke about Bob, and look in your program. There's a list of previous winners of the Fourth Estate Award, and those who spent a career with us, some spent a shorter time, but Herb Block, Shirley Povich, whose legacy George perpetuates, David Broder, Mary McGrory, Bill Raspberry, among others. Now, there's so many folks here who've been connected with the Post for a long time. We would all tell you that those were great journalists, honored for greatness, but they were also great people. What a lucky place where, as David says, the people we all wanted to emulate, the people we all loved and admired, were also the people who were kind to colleagues, as David described. And it wasn't just him and Weisskopf, both of whom went on to be pretty big names in the business. It was the summer interns, it was the beginning reporters who worshiped Woodward, who had come into the business because of him and Carl, and who learned from him. Just think about this about yourself. Suppose, as David said, when you're in your very early 30s, you've not only broken the Watergate story, you've not only done work that's led to the only resignation of a president in American history, you've not only won a Pulitzer Prize, you've not only written the #1 best-selling book in the United States, sold it to the movies, been played by Redford. What would you do with the rest of your life? Honestly, 99% of people would kick back. They would say, I'm going to enjoy myself more, whatever enjoyment constitutes. Bob went to work harder. He never, ever, ever let up. It was his work habits. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and reread all the President's Men. It was his work habits that broke the Watergate story. It was reporting at night. It was knocking on the doors of people who could not talk to him in the office, but opened the door and told him and Carl the story. The great Edward Bennett Williams once said to me, "What nobody in Washington has, what everyone craves, is longevity." And Woodward, a newspaper reporter, achieved that. He has done legendary reporting all his life for the Post, but he's now also written and published his 17th book. 12 of his previous books have become #1 bestsellers. And I don't know that any writer, since they started keeping bestseller lists, has written that many #1 best-selling books. But the measure of a reporter's life is not how many prizes has he won, or how much money has he made, or how famous is he. The measure of a reporter's life is how much have we learned from him? What has he told us that we didn't know before? This room is full of great reporters. It's the National Press Club. I see out here Simeon Booker, another former winner of this award, who also passed through the Washington Post on the way to what Teresa called a legendary career, and that is so. But the answer with great reporters is, and the answer with Woodward is, we have learned enormously. Yes, at the time of Watergate, but over and over and over again since. The stunning details in the final days, the closest ever examination of the Supreme Court and the Brethren, the first look from inside at the Fed in his book about Greenspan, his book about war and why we go to war called The Commanders. But I would single out the 4 books that Bob wrote about Presidents Bush and Obama and the wars that we fought and continue to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan. Within a year of the time the first American soldiers deployed to Afghanistan, Bob had published a book with the National Security Council minutes, with the discussions that had taken place in that council. What did the Secretary of Defense want to do? What did the head of the CIA want to do? What did the president want to do? It is all there. It read one way in 2002, and it reads a very different way in 2012. And Bob didn't stop. He went back with the book immediately after President Bush chose to begin the war in Afghanistan, another 2-3 years later when that conflict was at its nadir, and another after the first year of the Obama administration. That book, Obama's Wars, has to be read in tandem with his new book, The Price of Politics, as the most complete portrait of the Obama administration anyone has yet published or will for a long time. How does the president run a meeting? Whose advice does he seek? How does he make up his mind? And Obama's Wars concludes with a 6-page, single-spaced, tight memorandum governing the United States and Afghanistan that President Obama wrote, but that no one had ever laid eyes on until Bob got a hold of it and published it. There is nothing in American history that compares to what Bob did in those 4 books. We've fought many wars from the Revolution to Vietnam, and in no case, and it would have been damn important in Vietnam, did we know what was on the minds of our leaders. But we can know that about the war now going on by reading Bob. in a sense, I mean this as a compliment. Bob is an old-fashioned man. He is old-fashioned with respect to our business, just as Dave Marinus said. And as well-known as he is, and I hope as wealthy as he is after all those #1 books, he would be far more wealthier and far more famous had he sought it. All he wanted to do was report, because he believed in the importance of reporting. And ladies and gentlemen, I know you do too. I know that is what built the institutions, what built the National Press Club, what built every one of its journalist members. And whatever changes in our profession, that will not change. News organizations are built on reporting. And this man never compromised his values, never sensationalized, never wanted to get his picture on TV, except when he learned something that people needed to know. He won't do it. He has the honest belief that telling people more of the truth is the best thing of all. Thank goodness for Bob Woodward. Tonight, we honor someone who deserves it for what he's done and for the way he's lived his life. I want to say a word about Marinus, who's one of Bob's oldest friends and closest buddies. They were each other's editors over the years. They were 1-2 on an investigative staff that would not quit. And as you have just seen, David, in his own way, is as special as Bob is. And as David said, they are different. Thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you to the Press Club for hosting all of us. You came to learn about Bob Woodward. You've learned a little about Catherine, about George. And first of all, there are a room full of present and former Washington Post people here. I can't introduce them all. I want you to meet 4, because I know that this room is full of fans of great journalism. And I want to introduce Marcus Brauckley, the editor of the Washington Post, Len Downey, his predecessor and Bob's and my colleague, who goes so far back that he was Bob's editor on many of the Watergate stories, and Dana Priest and Ann Hull, who are collectively the 2 reporters who broke the Walter Reed story some years ago, but have each gone on and won other Pulitzer Prizes for other work since. And would the 4 of you stand? Yeah. But if you have not read and enjoyed David's amazing book on the president, Barack Obama, the story, it is another in an amazing career of David Marinus books, but I could not recommend it to you more highly. I want to mold my remarks about Bob around what David has said.